Watch this video about Medical Properties Trust before the next earnings call. As I'm recording this, it's the end of September, and that date will make a lot of sense as we go through this video, because a major restriction regarding the dividend is lifting from Medical Properties Trust. As I'm recording this video, stock is just below $5 and dividend is 8 cents for every share, and it's being paid out very soon here in August, and we have the earnings call coming up as well. This dividend is a lot smaller than it used to be. It used to be almost 30 cents a share. They cut it to 15 cents a share to preserve capital and pay down debt. And then, despite normalized funds from operations being able to cover a dividend of 15 cents a share, they cut it again, this time to 8 cents a share. This was more than a year ago. Let's take a look at a very old article on the matter. You gotta do your own research here. You can ask ChatGPT, for example, are there any court-imposed restrictions on MPW dividend? It's gonna say, no, I can't find any. Just relax, just go through the earnings report, do the due diligence yourself. Don't trust AI so much, because there was a restriction on it, but it's lifting. Let's scroll down here a little bit and see. The amendment will see the facility's capacity fall from 1.4 billion to less than 1.3 billion. As part of the agreement, Medical Properties Trust has agreed to limit the cash component of its quarterly dividend to no more than 8 cents a share, below the current level here, through the end of next September. This was back in August last year. So September and next September. That's now. That's right now. So this restriction has lifted. And I remember back in those days when I looked at the stock, no cash component. We thought, are they gonna perhaps issue more shares to current shareholders? Just a share component, some way to mess with short sellers. They're still there, by the way. Short sellers, 33% of float. But how would they react if dividend were to increase in this case? If they have short sold somebody else's stock and dividend is being paid, well, then they have to cover that dividend towards the shareholder that they borrowed from their own pocket. So it's going to be a greater cost to borrow. It's going to be very expensive to borrow MPW shares in that case. Now, will they just increase dividend because of the restriction is over? Or will they relax and perhaps pay down even more debt? Who really knows? They've raised more liquidity than planned. If we listen in on earnings calls, they had a target. I think it was roughly 2 billion. They raised more, and they raised it quicker. So perhaps we're going back to higher dividends. That would certainly send share price higher. And we know from the earnings calls, because we all listened, right? We're all doing our own due diligence, that management is not compensated any share compensation unless share price here hits $7. None of the options are going to vest unless that happens. So management has a great monetary interest for share price to increase in this case. And you could hear poor old Ed Aldag sigh deeply when mentioning that management would not be compensated on shares until, they hit $7 a share. So no excessive management compensation until that point. Man, poor guy. He's gonna have to cut back on private jet flights and other fun activities. Better for shareholders, and full disclosure here, I have almost 10,000 shares in this company. So of course I share for stock price to go higher and for everybody who owns shares to make a ton of money. But as with all investments, it's risky. Do your own due diligence. It's a dividend stock, it's not a growth stock. It will never have the high flying returns that you can see from growth stocks. But from my perspective, it makes a lot of sense, as somebody who works in sales, who have income being very uneven throughout the year, having a few dividend stocks that pay me a good amount quarterly in this case is very nice with unpredictable income. This helps smooth out consumption. Alright, enough about that. The important part here is that the time constraint on this amendment here has been lifted. Originally, it was related to the bankruptcy proceedings and some hospitals being fully handed over to new operators, but we saw a small holdout with 3 hospitals, and the time constraint came before the handover requirement. So alright, amendment no longer in place. Anything can happen next earnings call, so make sure you don't miss it. Listen in if you're a MPW shareholder or interested in this company. Alright, that's been it for this video, and as always, hope you guys make a ton of money, whatever investments you decide to make. Take care now, bye bye.